Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wolang Wednesday. We are live and ready to go, and we're going to be doing a class today all about how to have the perfect curriculum for your age group. Are you ready for this? All of the elementary school teachers for world language and middle school, you're finally going to be represented the way that you deserve to be. So if you are new to these parts, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. My name is Devin, and I am the teacher author behind La Libre Language Learning, if you teach French, or La Libre Language Learning, if you teach Spanish. So come say hi and tell me, what grade do you teach for world language? Are you working with maybe elementary learners? Are you in a mix of K through 8 in a different environment where maybe you're going from school to school? Are you middle school? Whoop, whoop. Or are you like me where you taught high school? Because I've got something for everybody today. We're going to be working with something called learner profiles. Now, you're all going to be looking at some blog posts that I have for you today as we go through a little bit of research-based practice on how different age groups acquire language, how they perceive their own language learning process, as well as how they navigate the school system and everything about being in a classroom and classroom life. And of course, that affects you a lot as the teacher, depending on what age group you're in. Now, why are we talking about this besides I'm sure that you can guess what many of those answers would be for yourself. But I think especially for world language teachers, and holla at me if you think this is true, but world language teachers, I'm personally certified to teach K through 12. That's a very large range. I specialize in high school, but I get asked a lot about what to do if I am switching between age groups. I get emails from teachers who are going between the middle school and the high school space, looking for what's going to be the difference between what I can expect in my classroom. Or even people who move from high school to elementary school and are just, their minds are blown by how much work they have to do, just shifting their headspace between the differences that they have working in something like K through 6 and seeing them for 6 weeks at a time instead of in their usual maybe block format, and just how different that can be. So in many other subjects, the way that teachers are taught their craft, they specialize in an age group. But for us as world language teachers, we specialize in our language and our content area. So it's a very different ballgame for us. So what I've got for you today is a way that you can quickly and easily get access to the research that you need to best craft both your day-to-day lesson plans as well as your overall curriculum, if that's the place that you're in, to achieve the best results and maximize your time depending on what age group you're in. So let's jump right into it. We're going to be working first with elementary school, K through 6, and then we're going to look at middle school, and then we're going to look at high school. I dropped in the event page below. Actually, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know if it's below, but it is on the event page here, what those blog posts are. And I can also drop these later in the broadcast for where you can get these links. But if you go to the lalibrelanguagelearning.com, you'll also see that I just posted these blog posts, so they should be right up there as your first option to check them out. So I'm going to share my screen here so that we can get into all of the goods today. All right, so let me check here and make sure that this is showing correctly. And while we're waiting for all that to come through, hi, y'all. Welcome to class. I'm so excited that you're here. Tell me what age group you teach. Let me see how this is working. Can y'all see this okay? Can you tell me in the comments if this is working for you? Ooh, mine's being a little slow right now. It's being a little slow, but we'll get there. We've got a lot of good stuff for elementary school teachers. I found so much research for you. I'm really excited to show you this. So where is everybody coming from and what are you teaching? Ooh, okay, good. Susanna says that she can see it fine. Oh, thank you, Susanna. And she's pre-K through grade 8. Susanna, You are the exact example of what we are talking about here, of somebody who teaches a huge age range. So Susanna and my fellow elementary school teachers who are watching this here, I want to first and foremost say, y'all are the real heroes. I am a middle school and high school person. We all know that we have our preference. I'm middle school and high school. So I found all of this information in a book that I have a link for you here. And you can probably see this link up here too, where you can get this, but I'm going to drop this in the Facebook broadcast as well later on. I'll be able to put it on my phone, but it's lalibrelanguagelearning.com. How to teach elementary world language. And where I'm finding all of this research is in this book called that I got while I was doing my student teaching and all that good stuff at College of Charleston, is The Teacher's Handbook, Contextualized Language Instruction by Shrum and Gleason. You know how there's always like one or two books that you just don't want to give back, even if you rented them? This was one of them for me. I still use this book all the time. And if you click on this is an affiliate link. I will get a small commission if you choose to purchase through this affiliate link on Amazon, but it's at no cost to you. You don't really need the book. You got everything that you need here, but I want to make sure that you know that everything that you're about to see and read on this page is a paraphrased version of chapter 4 from this book. So let's take a look here. On Amazon, you can get this for $30 if you want it. You can get it used for $20. I use this book all the time. This is something that I come back to a lot. So I would recommend that if you did not go through a teacher training program to be a world language teacher, like that happens to many of us, right? We somehow land in the field of world language, through life. But if you were not lucky enough to be in a really solid teaching program like me, then that's really the only book that you need. It's really the only book that you need. You can just skim through it. It's a real easy read. But if you have already been through a world language program and you just need a refresher, you don't need the book. This is really all you need. You can just go through it here. So as we are looking through here, let's see what we got. Oh, we got, welcome back, Stephanie. So you're 6th through 8th. Cool. All right. So we're going to be relying on you for, well, no pressure, but you're going to be able to chime in for middle school, because we're going to do that in the middle. All right. And then we've got Toshi is pre-K through 5th. Ooh, that's a huge range too. Toshi or Tashi, please make sure that I'm saying your beautiful name right. Let me know in the comments. And then Paula says, I teach high school in Orlando and I teach Spanish. Yeah, high school Spanish. That's me. Oh, Stephanie says, love that book. You're on the 2nd edition and now they're on 5. Yeah, they've got a lot of editions. So I have the 4th edition. The 5th edition, I'm not even going to go there with the link. I'm sure it's better, but it's $100. You don't need that. You could rent it if you want. You could Kindle it, whatevs. But this is everything that I'm about to show you here is from that book because I'm not an expert on elementary. I am certified to teach it, but I honestly was never in an elementary classroom. I was only in middle or high school. But here's some cool things that I found because right now I'm working on an elementary curriculum. So I had to do a lot of research to make sure that I was up to date. So elementary school teachers, make sure that I'm up to speed on all my things. And I would love to hear your comments below on what you found to be true, what it looks like in your classroom. Okay. Now, we talked about why we're doing this. In this post and in this class, we're going to be talking all about how we can equip ourselves with the best classroom management strategies that, of course, is going to lead to better language acquisition for the varying ages of elementary world language. Because like many of you that Paula know, that book is not focused on elementary. It is for K through 12. And that chapter 4 is entirely for elementary school. And then there's a whole chapter on middle school that we're going to get into next. So no, it's not entirely for elementary world language teachers. I have not yet found a book that's just elementary. If you do know of a book like that, put it in the comments below. We would love to know what your recommendations are for that. I did find the middle school chapter. I don't even remember what chapter it is. The book's over there and I'm not going to go get it. But the middle school chapter about teaching culture is the bomb. It's the best. And we're gonna see why, because middle schoolers have a very unique perspective when it comes to culture. So, but don't worry, let's focus on elementary. We'll talk about middle school in a minute. But one of the reasons why I think that this topic is really important, even though we don't talk about it enough, except for on the, oh my gosh, why can I not remember the name? It's the Muffalati or MFLTA Twitter chat, that awesome Lang chat. I'm not on Twitter personally, because I only have time for 2 social medias right now. But that Twitter chat has so much good like early language content and material. They talk about elementary language all the time. They have a lot of good stuff. But otherwise, it's really hard to find good content for elementary world language teachers. Can I get a witness to that? Let me know, elementaries. It's really hard. So my intention is to make sure that you have exactly what you need in a very quick and easy to find place. So go to this blog post after this so that you have something that you can skim through to make sure that your stuff is on point. I also found that while doing some research that certain topics and curriculum structures, even though we wouldn't think of it this way, actually lend themselves better to certain age groups than others. So it's important to know how your learners acquire language, because some things they're not going to be receptive to, whereas other age groups really would be. So let's dive in. So from, as we talked about, chapter 4, this whole book, Contextualized Language Instruction, which as we're learning is clearly a world language teacher Bible. The early world language learner. The early world language learner. So many people think, and so we're gonna be debunking some stereotypes here. This is also an important part of second language acquisition research, that bilingual students, because they usually have a little bit of a delay, especially if they're bilingual from birth, that they have a little bit of a delay in their speech, that they often have more difficulties at school. And anybody who is an ESOL teacher can probably speak to this too, that there are a lot of misconceptions about this, but bilingual students have a huge advantage in the literacy department. So clearly we need to be doing better in this. They have an enhanced ability, according to this insert name here that starts with B, 1977 research. They have an enhanced ability to problem solve, and they learn how to read earlier because they already have a very strong neural pathway in their head between the relationship between symbols and sound. I am actually living proof of this because my first language that I learned to read in was actually Japanese. Like, my first experience at school was pre-K in Japan. My family was in the military and we were stationed there. And I have 4 siblings. I went to pre-K. My 2 older siblings, who were 7 and 10, both went to Japanese elementary school because my mom really thought that it was important to invest in our cultural awareness and language learning since we were freaking living abroad. Like, why not? Instead of going to a DoD school, DoD school, all my military brats know. And we are actually living proof of this. Even though we weren't really any different from our peers, we learned to read almost a full year earlier than all of our non-bilingual counterparts. I unfortunately can't speak that much Japanese anymore because I didn't use it when I came back to the States. So many tears, but I'm working on it on Duolingo because I love it. But that we already had a lot of neural pathways that were very well established at a young age. So learning how to read it came very naturally to us rather than our other counterparts. This was not really true. And, there are differences, of course, but this was not true for my brother, who was too young to go to school. He learned how to read at about an average age. But me and my 2 sisters, 3 of us together, we learned how to read a lot earlier than our counterparts. Going back to American schools, we noticed that pretty early on. We're like, what? I want to read this chapter book already. And we weren't really any different from anybody else. And then this other study, Lambert and Kleinenberg, that K right there, insert name there, for 1967, the age of 10 for the early world language learner seems to be a crucial time in developing attitudes towards nations and groups perceived as the other. This is very important information to us. How many times in your world language career have you had to put culture to the side because of curriculum constraints, because of time constraints? I don't know, because of a pandemic, for all the things. But this piece of information right here hit me like a ton of bricks when I read it, because every world language teacher, I feel like, struggles with this same problem. Tell me if you feel this way too. Have you ever felt this way, where culture is very hard for you to incorporate in the curriculum because it just doesn't get as much attention as it should? we really need to rethink this in the elementary world language classroom, because 10 is crucial. 10 is a crucial age. It is the crux. It is the crux between seeing somebody as different but relatable or the other. That's where 10 is really that age where that happens. So far less important is the whole debate about accents is this. You know, reaching native-like pronunciation is far less important than this whole thing. And developing attitudes towards nations and groups proceed as the other. So keep that in mind the next time that you have a meeting in either your district or in your department, however it's structured, that culture needs to be prioritized in an elementary world language curriculum. Absolutely, because you have such a window of opportunity here. Children who are 10 years of age are more open toward people who are different from themselves than 14-year-olds, a very critical age. And the reason why is because they're in the process of proceeding from egocentrism to reciprocity. I can't tell you exactly what that means from exactly how egocentricity is being applied here, but what I can infer from this is that reciprocity, I know egocentricity must be just the whole idea of being centered around the self. My son's going through that right now as he just turned 5. To reciprocity, they're open to new information introduced during this time. So this is a nice window of opportunity here. Children also between the ages of 7 and 12 demonstrate role-taking ability, and they're the most open to learning about people from other cultures. You know what? We're just going to play a game for how many times that I can screw up a researcher's name in here. M, insert name here, 1982. 1982. That's where we're going to go with that. Here are the advantages. We all know as world language teachers how crucial it is to start your programs early. We've been there, we've done that, we fought the good fight trying to get people to take us seriously when we say that the earlier the better when it comes to world language. This is where it comes down for real in terms of what people have found in research and longitudinal studies. And I'm about to show you a really cool one later. They have, especially in very, very early programs, like what a lot of you are doing in pre-K programs, they have a heightened level of oral proficiency. They will be able to reach crazy high heights of oral fluency and oral proficiency. And they have more complex cognitive processing than your middle school students will have. So if you are one of the peeps who mentioned on here that they're teaching a very large age range, pre-K through 6, I know somebody said pre-K through 8th, your 8th graders need to go a lot slower than your kindergarteners, which seems very counterintuitive, but it's true. And we'll see exactly why that is when we look at the middle schoolers. Also, they have higher performance on standardized tests and basic skills than compared to their non-bilingual counterparts, which is cool. And they have a much greater openness to other cultures than their middle school or high school counterparts. But don't worry, middle school and high school teachers, I got you for how we can combat this and just how we need to approach this subject a little bit differently than elementary school teachers do. Something that needs to get talked about too, especially for those of you, let me look in here and see. I know we had, oh, amazing. Culture has switched to a major part of my curriculum this year. That's amazing. Tell us how that's going for you. That is really, really hard to do. Oh, we've got Anna Julia. So nice to see you. I hope that I'm saying your beautiful name correctly. Please make sure that I am. You're teaching middle school French. Perfect. So we'll be looking on middle school in there. You did your master's in teaching languages. Oh, good, Stephanie. Then you're an expert in a lot of this. Cool. Cool. Thanks y'all for being here with me and learning all about learner profiles. Okay, so yeah, Toshi teaches pre-K through 5th. Yeah, so you know the differences between these can be really big. And then Susanna was the one who taught pre-K through 8th. All right, cool. So y'all especially are going to be really interested in this right here, the differences between early and late elementary. Here are some differences. This is based on one specific study. Of course, you know, when it's one specific study, there might be some differences in findings, but I thought this was really interesting because longitudinal studies, especially, they usually have a wider range of research participants And since they have a longer lifespan, they obviously have more data. So I prefer looking at longitudinal studies. But this one I was really excited to come across in the book. It was adorable little cuties, K through 6, or pre-K through 6, I should say, studying Japanese in North America. And it was 6 consecutive years in an FLES program. And if I remember correctly, it was about 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So not a ton of exposure in terms of class time, but certainly very consistent exposure over time. So here are the main differences that the study saw between early and late elementary. Children in grades 3 to 5 performed better than those in K through 2 in comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, and grammar, but not pronunciation. The K through 2 is definitely one in terms of pronunciation, which makes sense because that's really their strong suit for K through 2 is pronunciation and parroting sounds. Also, something that you'll find with your older learners in the elementary age group is that there's a lot of variability in the results that you'll get. So it's normal that you'll see in a K through 2 group, according to this study as well as some others, that your older learners have a wide range of abilities, but your K through 2s should be getting about the same score on a lot of the different tests that you might be doing in terms of oral proficiency, fluency, and pronunciation, all that good stuff. They should be progressing at about the same rate at about the same time, as long as they're all getting exposed to the same time frame of language, as long as they're getting exposed to the same high quality input, all that good stuff. But your older learners, that's where things, like as soon as they hit 3rd grade about is where things start to get variable. Also, the longer students were in the program, they had really positive self-assessments, which is really cool. And another reason why we should be starting earlier with language programs. The other interesting thing that I think applies to my siblings and I as well is that everybody made progress in different areas at different rates in the later groups. Some made more progress in fluency, some more in vocabulary, and some in pronunciation. And this trend will continue to grow and exacerbate as you get to older students, especially in high school. The range is crazy in high school. So, for example, my pronunciation and fluency of other languages is pretty high because I was an early learner of another language. I mean, pre-K, that was me in Japanese, fully immersed in the language. So replicating sounds is pretty easy for me. However, my sister, who knows 6 languages, she is able to pick up on complex grammatical concepts, if you will, and pick up new syntaxes and systems. She can pick those up a lot faster than I can. So that's just an evidence of, like, we were exposed to the same amount of language in the same environment. She was older than I was, and she also has a different brain than I do. And we have strengths in different areas. So I have better pronunciation. She is able to process a lot more information than me, which is why she speaks 6 languages and I speak 3. It's wild, absolutely wild. So that is where you will see a lot of those individual differences, especially if you have people who are exposed to the same environment. Overall conclusions for elementary learners are some things that you will see here. We already talked about these, and this is just a summary. So let's go through a little summary here. Elementary learners also, this part we haven't talked about yet, but elementary learners have more advantage over their secondary counterparts. Even though they're younger, they have more advantages. But something that we need to watch out for is that even though their brains are more primed for the neural pathways required to acquire a language, they need far more time to move through the levels of proficiency. Far more time. They can make significant progress. The earlier they start, the more uniform their gains. And consistency is really key to a successful program. This is something that you'll run into a lot of problems with, especially when it comes to curriculum and budgets and all those things that we don't have a ton of control over, that we, as much as we can, when we are able to, fighting for consistency in terms of when we can see our students and for how long makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. And as we learned, it's a huge potential for shaping cultural empathy and awareness. Is by that age 10, you've got a lot to work with. Let's dig deep into some of these learner profiles by age group. So I'm going to let you read through some of these here. This is from a different research study, still cited from the same book though. It's all coming from the same book. Curtin and Dahlberg, insert D word here, in 2010. So we're looking at here preschool students 2 through 4, primaries 5 through 7. My son is in this age group right now, 5 through 7. He's been learning language since he was a little one. I've been teaching him Spanish, kind of on and off, not very seriously, but definitely on the side a little bit. And I can definitely see him going through a lot of these stages. So my elementary school teachers, I want you to tell me, which one do you find to be the most true for you? And while you're thinking about that, so if you teach preschool, which one do you find to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. That's a thing. I'm definitely doing that. Let me see, can I zoom in here? I don't know. Well, it looks like you can see it pretty well. So see if you can read these here. Preschool students 2 through 4. Which one really stands out to you? It was challenging to make the change at the beginning, but it's made a huge impact on the kids. I've incorporated many different experiences for them. Our cafeteria staff has prepared Mexican and Costa Rican meals for us. This has been our best year yet. That's incredible. That's really incredible. That is awesome. You're doing amazing things. That's really cool. Helen Curtin's Making the Match. Stephanie, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. Is that a book title? I missed that part. Is that a recommendation for an elementary book? Because that would be awesome. But tell me more about that. All right, so for your preschool students, here's what we got for our learners. Let me check our time too. All right, we're doing all right. So they absorb language effortlessly, as I'm sure you know. They imitate speech and sounds well. Here's my favorite part though. They don't work well in groups. They are completely self-centered, which this is where a lot of people say, of course, in the workplace that parents have a significant disadvantage in all things. Lies. You have such an advantage as a language teacher if you have a child or a child in your life that's a significant presence, because you have seen how they develop through these linguistic phases. Oh my gosh, you know already that they have a short attention span and that they respond best to activities surrounding their own interests, and that they would never work well in groups. You would never put preschoolers together in a group because it's a disaster. It's a disaster. Also, this is something that I found to be really interesting because we're already doing this just from how we teach our own children in our own culture, that they will do the best with rhymes, tongue twisters, and songs because guess what? They hone in on phonological awareness, and that's what toddlers care about. Makes sense, right? It just makes sense. Because that's the stage that they're at in their brains, is they're figuring out the sounds of their language and practicing them. You know, that 18-month stage where they're formulating a few words, they're babbling still a little bit, but they're mostly just mimicking the sounds that they hear around them. I mean, this is perfect. Rhymes, tongue twisters, and songs, it's perfect. Primary students is where things really start to get different. They learn best through concrete experiences and immediate goals. My son is in this world right now, and he definitely responds well to immediate goals. Having goals that are far away are pretty hard for him, except for right now, he's saving up for a $30 toy, which is pretty impressive. I was pretty impressive about that part. But the chores that he does in order to earn the money for the $30 toy, they need to be immediate goals. Like if there are things that take him longer than 15 minutes, he won't do it. He's spoiled. He's very spoiled. Also, this is something that is very true of him right now, is that he is all about imaginative play and dramatic play. And this is also, if you are a part of my newsletter, get on it if you're not, because that's how you'll always know about these classes. But for dramatic play, This is something that his Spanish teacher is doing beautifully well right now, because they're working with stuffed animals all the time. They're pretending to be the stuffed animal. They're pretending the stuffed animal's alive. They're talking to him and treating him like he's going on a picnic and eating different things and all kinds of cool stuff right now. The whole fantasy and dramatic play really hits home with 5 to 7-year-olds. So this is kindergarten through 2nd grade. They love all that. You'll see as well that really talented elementary school teachers, a lot of them have a cool mascot in their room. Maybe they have they have puppets, or they have stuffed animals. They have like a whole assortment or collection. This is why students really respond to that at that age. They're learning through oral language, and they love to have a character that goes with it to match their imaginative play zone that they're in right now. They love the use of stories. They have a short attention span, and they require large muscle activity. They want to run around and play games, and they need structured, specific directions and regular routines. Oh, you're so welcome. Toshi, you be sure this link will always be here. It's always free. You can come to my Facebook or to my YouTube channel to watch the rest of it. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, Stephanie, good. Yeah, Stephanie got us a recommendation for an elementary book to read. Yes, good, because we need that. Meaning for elementary world language teachers. All right, so that's what we got for primary students. And then for late elementary students, I thought this was really interesting, because this is the group I probably know the least about, 8 through 10-year-olds. So if you teach 8 through 10-year-olds, give me the goods on if this is true. But I thought this was really interesting. As we learned earlier, they're at the peak for being open to people different from themselves. They begin to understand cause and effect, and they work well in groups. They're into the idea of groups. They often dislike working with the opposite sex, very interesting, and they learn well from imagination and stories that feature binary opposites. So we'll talk more about that in a minute with the whole good and evil. Also, I thought this was clutch, super clutch. They love working with rubrics and enjoy peer editing and scoring activities. So they love to judge each other and themselves on how they're doing and how their peers are doing and how they can get better. And now my elementary education is making so much sense, because we used to do this all the time, especially with our very dumb standardized tests that we used to have to do in 3rd and 5th grade. Sorry, they were dumb. They were super dumb. A lot of standardized tests are dumb. Sue me, I don't care, they're dumb. But we used to do a lot of peer editing with our writing. With my 3rd grade standardized tests I had to take and the 5th grade standardized tests I had to take, we used to do all kinds of peer editing. And now it just makes sense. What amazing teachers I had. What amazing teachers. And you can do the same. If you are already doing peer editing and scoring activities on things like target language use, fluency, word count, writing accuracy. Oh, there's so many things that you could do peer editing with. So many things. Self-assessment and reflection, gold in this age. I also have some recommendations for you in terms of what you can do for your elementary world language curriculum. If you're in the mood to spiff it up a little bit, if you know it needs a few tweaks here and there, mainly what I want to make sure that you hit home with is that if you teach elementary, make sure that you're using stories. Stories is what they love, and this is why. Stories embody this stage that learners are in the elementary phase, about ages 5 through 10. It varies a little bit, but ages 5 through 10, called the mythic stage. In the mythic stage, children are learning about the world around them in layers, and this is the latest layer of understanding for them to grow their social emotional complex and awareness of the world. The mythic stage is binary, good, evil, annoying, fun, tall, short, very emotionally charged. And they're responding to the world in terms of everything being emotionally charged: boring, interesting, good guys, bad guys. You know what does this really well? Have you ever walked through a young adult section of a bookstore or a library? You can see that the mythic stage is alive and well in all of the stories geared towards 5 to 10-year-olds. But as soon as you hit that 11 to 12-year-old, that's where you get into that young adult reader, where the stories are more complex, they're more layered, and they start to ask questions about the justice of who gets to be the good guy and who gets to be the bad guy. It's around age 11 to 12 that really starts to change. And that's because of the developmental stages that children are going through. So if you're thinking about different activities to do with your students, especially if you're teaching something as varied as pre-K through 8, your 5 to 10-year-olds are in a mythic stage, and they will really enjoy stories that talk about polar opposites. Like the specific example given in this researcher's work, Egon, E word here. All this, I think this is number 5 for a researcher's name that I've completely effed up. So 1979, Egan says here that they like to engage in topics through polar opposites, like the Wicked Witch versus the Perfect Princess, because they believe the world to think and feel like the emotions of a child as well. So that's how they want to explore the world. They also want to reflect on their learning with emotions. And that's why the mythic stage works so well with elementary. And that's honestly why. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to teach world language. Your students will acquire language a lot of the times without your help, even just a little bit. But the story format, especially via comprehensible input umbrella of teaching methods, it works so well, especially at the elementary age, because it's a lot of it is story based. So it just sinks in really well. They dig their teeth into it. It's great. So if you're not doing stories, now's the time to get some books. For real. It's going to slay. If you are not sure where to get books, I have a whole class for you. Go to my Facebook page, La Libre Language Learning, and go to the media section and the videos, and you'll find a class where I have very, very vivid pink hair before it started to fade that is all about CI novels and where to find them. You'll love it. All right. Who's ready for middle school? Middle school teachers, we're in the house. So let's talk about middle schoolers and why they're different and how cool they are. Now, I've spent a little bit of time in a middle school classroom. I did my student teaching there. So I have a teeny bit of knowledge on middle schoolers, but middle school teachers, make sure that you catch me on the details because y'all know the real facts. But this is what I found for early adolescent world language learners, and I added a little bit of my own personality in there for things that I also found. When you think middle school language learner, I want you to be thinking Tina Belcher. If you know, you know. We're at Tina Belcher status here. So you got your 8th graders who are going through, in ages 11 through 14, dramatic developmental changes. The most changes in the shortest amount of time in your entire lifespan, including being a baby. So between 11 through 14, their beautiful brains are so busy working on social and emotional changes as well as physical changes that their intellectual development takes a little bit of a back seat during this time period. They reach something called a cognitive plateau. So if you have ever switched from the elementary classroom to the middle school classroom, or if you've worked with a peer who has maybe done this, you might have seen this happen in real time where people experience this, I don't want to call it frustration, but a little bit of confusion, I guess I could say, of why is this not sinking in? Like I'm teaching the same way that I did my 6th graders or my 5th graders, or a lot of high schoolers who switch to middle school. They notice right away that there's just a difference and they can't really quite put their finger on it. This is the difference. The students are not any different in terms of intellectual capacity. It's just that what you're saying is going to take longer to stick because their brains are not up here. They're working with everything else that's changing and going on. They're prioritizing their development. I was just watching a cool documentary about the human development in babies, and the same thing happens when we're between 3 and 6 months, years of age. And that's why human baby heads are so flippin' big, because we spend the 3 to 6 months, I think was the age range. Don't quote me on that. Any doctors or nurse practitioners who are watching this, my mom's going to kill me because she's one who are watching this, but we spend half of our calories that we eat when we are very, very young babies, maybe between 3 to 6 months, it's about that age range, growing our brains so our muscles don't grow at all because we're so focused on growing our brains at that time. And that's why babies have a hard time holding themselves up because their dang brains are so big. Isn't that cute? It's really cute. But your middle schoolers are going through honestly a similar process where they've got so many changes going on, think Tina Belcher, that they don't have a lot of cognitive steam to focus on what you're saying. So steady pace, steady ship, tons of patience, several lessons on the same topic. I experienced this when I was teaching 7th graders and 8th graders the same exact topic at the same time while student teaching. And the variance in how long it took for certain topics to sink in was wild, just in 1 year of difference. My middle school teachers know what I'm talking about, that there's just a crazy amount of variation in what happens even just day to day in middle school because they're going through so many changes. Also, because they're going through a lot of social changes too. They have multiplying and rapidly changing interests. They are no longer the very simple car loving 5th grade boy that you knew. Like once they hit 7th grade, they're like, oh, there's this whole big world out there. And so they have so many interests. Capitalize on that. They have a lot of cool things that they want to talk about. They want to assert their independence and their identity, which is a great time to do self-discovery projects, things that are all about me. Your students will literally get up there and talk about themselves all freaking day long. And also, if you're not doing this in middle school, it needs to happen. I need to add this to the blog post. I forgot to do this, but this definitely needs to be added. So I recommended that for your curriculum for elementary school, make sure that you include stories. Stories are great in middle school, of course, because stories are great anytime for any age group. I heavily relied on stories in high school, different kinds of stories. But in middle school, oh, you better be doing special person interviews. You better be doing that because they're going to talk about themselves all day long. They don't even care that they're not doing it right. Another important thing about their language at this time is that they also don't really care about their accuracy as much as your high schoolers will. High schoolers are highly sensitive to accuracy, especially if you shut them down about their accuracy. Take note. But middle schoolers, they're not as concerned about whether their language is accurate. They care about whether they're getting their meaning across, which means that you can do a lot of speaking activities sooner. They're very concerned with self-image, as I'm sure you can imagine. You remember what it's like to be in middle school, or you're trying to figure everything out. Like you're trying to figure out, like, oh my gosh, how do I, if you're a girl, you remember like, how do I do my hair? How are people looking like that? I don't understand. And they want to establish identities as members of a peer group in the way that they act, in the way that they dress, and the things that they do. And that affects everything, boys, girls, non-binary, any gender that they identify with, whatever, all of the things. It's perfect to dive into interests real hard at this age group too, especially during the age of self-identity and self-discovery. They would love it. They would love to dive into interest into a really deep level. So your elementary school learners, they like interests. They like it. They'll talk about it all day long, but they would much rather hear about a hero and how they get themselves out of a sticky situation. Middle schoolers are not going to care as much about that. They want to hear about real life people, A, and B, they want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about themselves all day long. And so here's an example of that. I already have an example here written for you. Routines, clothing, habits, hangouts, what makes them who they are? 8-year-olds don't really care about that. They just think that underwear is funny. So like if you're teaching a clothing unit, it's gonna be kind of wasted on 8-year-olds. I mean, just the basics are good, right? But you go real deep into a clothing unit with 8th graders, oh man, that would slay. But middle schoolers also, when it comes to things like aspects of your physical appearance, they will not respond well to that. So don't even go into the whole realm of sizes. Don't even go into the whole realm of physical characteristics if you can avoid it. I mean, maybe just scratch the surface of it, but they're very uncomfortable with the whole thing. They do not want to talk about themselves and what they look like. They want to talk about who they are. They want to talk about their identity. They really do not want to draw any more attention to the fact that they look very different than how they arrived yesterday. They don't want to do that. In terms of your ability to branch off in different directions, they respond really well to independent opportunities. So I would really recommend doing Genius Hour. Genius Hour is awesome for this age group. I also did it. I dabbled in it a little bit in high school and I loved it. I loved it for the little bit that I did. I would love to have done more with that. It was so cool. They also respond really well to content-based units with a culminating activity or assessment. They love to see the full spectrum and end goal and follow along that path with you. They think that's really cool. But 8-year-olds to 10-year-olds, they don't really care that much about the structure. They like shorter units in general. And for my brief experience in 6th grade, I would say that they do better with shorter units, honestly. But elementary teachers, y'all are the experts, so make sure that you chime in here on what's going on. The middle school student in world language, as we talked about here, anybody who's taught middle school can tell you there's a world of difference between a 6th grader and a 7th grader. But I would like to remind you of this important term that I learned from AC Quintero and all the times that we've worked together to teach teachers about how to use units, novel units in the classroom, because she's an expert on writing novels as well as teaching novels. She taught me this really cool term called windows and mirrors, self-discovery through windows. Your students in middle school can really use more advanced stories in order to see themselves in another character, mirror, or windows into another culture through experiencing through experiencing the thoughts, emotions, and feelings of another person directly. Talking about a culture as a unit really doesn't land with them. Talking about somebody on the surface level of their identity really doesn't land with them, but hitting the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of a person from another target culture, especially somebody that's different from them, really hits home with them. They love that. Also, can we talk about the fact that middle schoolers really need to stop getting a bad rap because they're awesome. They're really awesome. Yeah, they're snarky, but that's what makes them fun. That's what makes them fun. Here are the advantages of teaching middle school and how middle schoolers' brains work. They enjoy knowledge for its own sake. All of my high school teachers like me they're crying just reading that sentence because that's not true anymore in high school unless you're a certain type of student. And that has nothing to do with intelligence, right? It's just that some students are just naturally intellectually curious. But every middle schooler just enjoys knowledge for its own sake, and they love learning about new things. They might pretend like they're too cool for it, but at this developmental stage, they're little sponges ready to absorb everything about the world around them because they're at a stage in their life where they're pushing the limits of what they know about the world. They're trying to figure out, okay, this is the bubble that I've been presented my whole life. Where can I pop it? Where are the boundaries? How can I cross them? Sound familiar? And they want to go deeper. They want to explore challenges. They want to go through big themes, and they want to experience very romantic feelings, not just in their personal lives, but also at school. Nobility, courage, genius, energy, and creativity. They like all of those things at this age. Also, I thought this was really fun, but they want to know real stories about real people, and they especially love the weird things about cultures. They want to know about their own culture as well as the other ones. I have a feeling that this has to do with the fact that they're trying to explore the limits, right? They're trying to push the limits. So they want to see what's hanging out in all the little nooks and crannies. They want to explore beyond their safe world, and they want to feel grown up, but they still need lots of structure. I have some recommendations for you based on what we found out about world language curriculums. I would not recommend that you do a lot of stuff that has to do with physiological changes. So daily routines, reflexive verbs, physical descriptions, all those things that we typically do in level 1 and level 2, don't do it as much, and try and de-emphasize it as much as you can if you have to in middle school. There's also anything about appearance relating back to size or physical appearance. You can diminish the importance of that in your curriculum. You can definitely do that. You can definitely do that in middle school. If you're teaching a curriculum where that has to be taught, you can teach what you have to and breeze right by it. I've done it. It's okay. You can do it. You can do it too. But if you are in the position where you can change that and maybe switch the focus of that curriculum or that topic that's already talking about physical appearance, I bet you could switch it to this. What if you made it more about self-identity, fashion, romance, self-expression? So your clothing unit could be more about fashion than it is about sizes, those types of things. The physical appearance could be more about cartoon characters than about real people. Like you can find ways, and about identities, like you can find ways to make that work. Da, 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 da. Yeah, and like if you're doing something that's entirely on physical appearance, good luck on that speaking quiz. They will intentionally bomb it. They really will. Also, something to note, this was a really interesting study and is not new. It's from 1978. Brain growth in children, from Epstein and Topfer, insert T word here. Brain growth in children slows down progressively between 11, ages 13.5, which may make them less able to acquire new cognitive skills and handle complex thinking processes than before. Met 1994, and this relates to this, as I think it was cited in this part here, but also this part here for Epstein and Topher Grace, maybe, maybe he did some linguistics. They're not in a cognitive position to handle abstract grammar like verb conjugation. So since we are in the middle school realm, I'm willing to bet that most middle school programs, especially that are represented here, are working with an exploratory program or level 1 or level 2 class, right? Skip the verb conjugation. There's the research is right there that they're not even in a capacity to do it. And I can tell you from my experience in middle school classrooms, it takes painfully long for middle schoolers to grasp something as abstract and complicated as verb conjugation. It's real. It takes a really long time. And it's time that you just don't have. It's time you don't have. You should be spending that time on other things. Excuse my dog. I'm sorry. I have a very loud dog. We just got to keep rolling. So I hope you can hear. I apologize for it. Here's something really cool though. They can memorize and retain stunning amounts of detail. They have a strong sense of justice, and they're actively looking for a sense of awe in the world. So you can do really cool things with middle schoolers and middle school units with that. Here are some things that we need to watch out for though. In middle school world language, they're very prone to stereotypes, meaning that they're trying to figure out the limits of their understanding of the world. So they're less accepting of differences if they don't know anything about the other culture, if they don't know anything or if they've never been exposed to the other culture. So what they need is, just like language input, they need cultural input, exposure to real people who exhibit differences from other cultures to combat that. And once they receive that cultural input, the openness is there, it's present. As long as they understand, though, these are the parameters that are especially important with middle schoolers. They need to understand how others think and feel. They can't just see them. They can't just read stories about their day-to-day lives and routines. They need to step in their shoes. They need to understand what that person is thinking and feeling. So I highly recommend that, just like your elementary learners, that you are teaching with stories with middle school students. You can write them, you can find them, you can do CI readers, but if that's not within your budget or your capacity this year, because, oh my gosh, I don't blame you, that's okay. You can work on it for next year, but there are ways that you can get these empathetic culture injections and stories in there that have that personal touch. There are many ways to do that. I have a ton of classes to help you out with that, but the surface understandings will miss the mark. Also, self-assessment is harder at this age, so be careful with that. And I don't really think that it's something you should focus on a ton anyways, if you can avoid it. All right, middle school teachers, what do you see on there? Did that hit with you? Stephanie says, I still do, but I focus on pets. Ooh, I love that. That's a really great way to handle physical and personality traits. That's awesome. Okay, y'all. You ready for this? Because we're about to get into my area. This is high school, high school. I love high schoolers. I love them. High schoolers are great. High schoolers are great, okay? So we're going to talk now about teaching world language in high school. Now, unfortunately, in the book that we're using, the teacher's handbook, there wasn't a ton of information that was specific to high schoolers. I have some SLA information for you, second language acquisition, that has to do with the differences between younger and older learners. But I'm just going to tell you about my own experience being in the trenches for 5 years of what it's like to be a high school world language teacher. And high school teachers, you put in the comments below what you find to be true, but I have 11 tips for you on what it means to be a high school world language teacher and how you can shape your curriculum, your lessons, and your classroom management to meet your students where they're at. Number one, I would say that is way different in elementary and middle school is the importance of mutual respect and fairness. This is important in every classroom. But in high school, if this does not exist, nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. In elementary and middle school, school is still their whole world. So you have a little bit of wiggle room to work with, but nothing happens until mutual respect and fairness is achieved. Period. Period. High schoolers are not afraid of their parents. I mean, some of them are, but they're not afraid of their parents. They don't care as much if you do the whole I'm going to call home thing. That only affects a few students, really. They care about whether you care about them. Now, do not get it twisted. That doesn't mean that you need to be the most well-liked teacher in the school. It's quite the opposite. What you need to do is do whatever you need to do to get to know your students. Target language, be darned. You won't get anything done unless you know and love your students. It means that they don't have to like you. Like, it's not anything along those lines. You don't have to be a well-liked teacher. It means that you have to show them, focuses on them early and often, that you like them. You respect them. You care about their experience in your class, and you care about fairness, and you treat every single student the same way, no matter the achievement levels and no matter the behavior, no matter anything. Everybody gets treated the same way with the same amount of relentless love and respect. Relentless love and respect. Insecurity is rampant in our world today, but especially in high schoolers. Love goes a long way in a high school classroom. Bottom line, hold order. You are in charge of that classroom, and treat them like people. Honestly, treat them like adults. They're basically adults. They're a little bit kids, but they're basically adults. So please treat them like they're adults. That is my best recommendation to you. That's my number one thing, is mutual respect and fairness before anything else. You invest in that early and often, you will reap the rewards a million times over. It makes your job better, and they also will learn a lot more. Number two, for world language high school students, the power of student choice. Oh man, they go goo-goo mamas for this stuff. Choice is everything. They love it. But I would say give them choice within structure. So for example, it's not a choice that we're doing a project on Carnaval. It is your choice who you get to work with, whether you're working alone or in a group. It just means that you might have a different amount of work, but that's up to you. And you also get to choose how you're going to present your project. Are you going to do it in front of the class? Are you going to make a really beautiful poster? Are you going, you know what I mean? Like, you give them choice within parameters. It works wonders. Also, this is something that I learned from Bryce Hedstrom, and I started practicing it in my classroom, and it worked wonders. This is amazing. This is specifically a target language thing. Acknowledge their learning pace, especially when it comes to how you speak to them in the target language. In elementary and middle school, students, especially middle school, students are very sensitive to how they're perceived by their peers, and high schoolers are too, but in a different way. Middle schoolers are still trying to figure out how they fit into the whole landscape with their peers. High schoolers have been in their bodies and understand how they learn for a long time already. So their identity is pretty well established by the time that they get to you in 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. So they know how fast they learn. It's not a secret. And honestly, probably their peers know it too. So we are tempted as teachers to hide learner differences from others because we want everybody to feel the same in our classroom. We want everybody to make sure that nobody gets singled out. And we don't want slower paced learners, people who it takes them just longer for them to process language. They might need to ask a few clarifying questions, and they might only be able to do things like say yes or no to a question, or they might be able to give you the exact verbiage is with the help of visuals or gestures, they can give you memorized phrases. Whereas other learners who might be who learn a little bit faster or process language faster are able to give you independent original phrases in different orders and maybe more complete phrases, maybe even with conjunctions. Guess what? The learners already know who the fast learners are. Everybody in your classroom already knows who the slower paced learners are going to be. And what they really appreciate above all else is if you let them be whatever pace they're at. So for example, if you are doing a whole question and answer dialogue thing, if you give somebody who is a fast-paced learner a fast-paced question, you speak a little bit faster, you ask them more higher level questions in terms of you ask them to give original thoughts and opinions, they'll appreciate that. And you say, great job, nice. And you move on to the next student, and then you ask them a yes or no question, and they answer yes or no. And you say, great job, that's awesome. You move on to the next one. Everybody in the room knows what just happened. And both of those students actually have more respect for you and appreciate that more. Because instead of giving the same question to both students, nobody benefits from that. Even though you're trying to protect their feelings, because I used to do that. I used to think that, well, we don't want anybody to know who is going to be the slower paced learner, but they already know who it is, and they want to be seen for who they are and respected for who they are. And they want you to say, great job, that was awesome. And I'm going to push you a little bit further next time. And the other person who is a higher paced learner, faster paced learner, I should say, who might be at a higher level of proficiency already, wants to be challenged. They want to be asked the higher level question. They don't want you to ask them a question that might not challenge them at all, because then they're just going to stop paying attention. So they want to be seen. They want to be treated the same for the level of effort that they're putting out, but they don't all want to be asked the same types of questions. That's really important in a high school classroom. I also think that letting pop culture influence your lesson planning is really fun and helps to make your class different from everything else that's going on in their high school world. It doesn't mean that you pretend to be an expert on modern culture. Let your students do it. So it involves things like, hey, I want you to go online, find a YouTube video about making a recipe on, or maybe a TikTok, because that's what's in these days. We watched this 2 years later. It's probably not TikTok, but watch something on TikTok, and I want you to find me a video that is in Chinese and is all about making a recipe or a recipe fail. And let your students be the experts and go find something cool. So you don't have to be the expert. Let them do it. It makes things really fun. Don't let them set the pace or the scope, though, because that's a disaster. I also think it's very valuable for high schoolers if you choose the student groups at first. Here's why. Students will usually choose to work with students who look and act like them, especially I taught in a couple different sized high schools. Small high school in a rural environment where everybody knew each other. So they were already like eyeing each other across the room, knowing who they're going to work with. If you teach an environment like that, it's good to mix things up occasionally, but also it rocks the boat if you never let them pick who they want to work with. So having a balance works really well in that environment. They already know each other. Let them work with their friends sometimes, as long as they're getting their work done, because friends often work the best together. You don't have to get over that initial friction of the awkwardness, right? But if they're working with the same person all the time, or they're obviously off task, that's a problem. And then they don't even get exposed to the rest of the students in class or work with somebody who's different than them. Then also you have the opposite problem of if you are always picking the groups, it gets a little tyrannical where the students don't feel like they have a say, and they get this feeling in their heads that you're always putting them with a person for a certain reason. So it shuts down whatever activity you're doing really fast. Do a nice healthy mix, self-selection and teacher chosen groups, and then do a mix of both abilities as well as mixed race, mixed gender groups for heterogeneous and heterogeneous groups. That really helps with grouping to make sure that you're mixing things up, that people are talking to different types of people. And if you ever have taught in a huge high school like I have before, they might not even know everybody in their class. So that helps. Build highly personalized curriculums with time to talk. This is another target language specific one. Some teachers feel that it's important to jump right into the lesson right away. And I was definitely the type of teacher who I would shut the door and start the lesson as soon as the bell rang. But I also like to start the day with a little bit of discussion, 2 to 3 minutes of us talking about our days. And I would let them do it in English so that they could talk freely, or the L1, wherever you're teaching or watching this. And it would sometimes go on for 10 minutes, and I would let it. Always, I would let it, because time for non-curriculum discussions, it is not off topic. You're building relationship capital. You get to 30 minutes and you might need to worry about it. They're obviously taking advantage of you. But asking about marching band competitions, dating snafus, family fights, and all that stuff, it's a great segue into awesome stories, really personalized lessons and learning, and relationship building. It makes a world of difference. And there's going to be a lot of days where you don't have time to do that, but on days that you can, give them ample time to talk to each other. It makes a huge difference. Respect the shy students. This has to do with target language learning as well as just being a high school student in general. I will say that I'm an extreme extrovert in certain aspects of my life, but also an introvert in others. I probably land somewhere around like 65-35 maybe. And I was a hardcore extrovert at school. And it's obviously why I like being a teacher. I love to be around people and meet people. And I don't mind being in front of people at all. Obviously, I'm in front of you right now, virtually. Many teachers are extroverts because it's a field that does attract extroverts. But there's also lots of teachers who are introverts. Which one are you? Tell me in the comments below. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Which one are you? I always like to know. But we don't need to understand why people are the way they are. We just need to respect it. And we also don't need to change the way that people are. We just need to respect it as long as they're still able to work in the environment that they are in. And the school environment highly favors extroverted students. The participation points with people who speak, especially in a world language environment, extroverts are often favored. So I highly encourage you, when possible, to respect the shy students, they're not really shy, but they're probably just introverted, where they prefer smaller groupings and they prefer one-on-one interaction, to make sure that you are creating opportunities and avenues for them to approach you one-on-one. For example, we all know that as a world language teacher, it's kind of a no-no to just call on people and get them to speak target language if they're not comfortable with it. It needs to be something that they volunteer for, usually. If you have a very reluctant speaker, approach them individually and figure out what's going on. And I would also say that letting them work by themselves or letting them work with other introverted students and speaking at their own pace works wonders. The only time you need to pull that parental fire alarm is if, even in a one-on-one setting, they won't speak to you. So try the one-on-one setting and see if that works. And if you don't get anything from that, then you need to have that target language talk where it's like, listen, this is a world language class. We need to speak in order to see your progress. All right, we just got a few more. Let's see what we got. Can you guess this one? I'm a huge fan of this. Treat high school students like adults. Almost. They're not really adults, but they're almost adults. I always taught students who had jobs and were taking care of siblings at home and often had more responsibilities than I did at home. So it felt weird to baby them or treat them like they were anything less than adults. Respect the stage of life that they're at. 11th and 12th graders, especially, they want to investigate real life rituals, hobbies, blogs, dating habits, places to eat, skating culture of other places. They want to know the real life nitty gritty of other places. And they've been in school long enough to know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So let them have the freedom to do that. And then, of course, rein in the boundaries if they cross it. But most of the time, they won't. There's only going to be about 10% of your students that are going to push that boundary a little further than they need to. But they're very curious about the target language world and culture and what exactly is real about it and what's really going on with that. They are still part kid only in their lack of experience, though. So you just need to help guide them in terms of the experience that they have about the world and shaping their understanding of another culture. Kind of like the middle schoolers. Also, I would say that your middle schoolers are like this too, but they're not really ready for adult topics yet. Your high schoolers are. They're ready for social justice. They're ready for adult topics. They're ready for deep conversations and they're ready for difficult truths. They also are ready for you to call out things that are unfair about their lives and their school environment. They're very ready for that, and you will get a much better relationship for them with just being honest with them instead of trying to fix it, because you can't fix everything that's unfair about their life and about their school experience. But something that's very helpful and empowering is just having somebody say, you're right, that's not fair, that's not right, even though you might not have the power or ability to fix it. They're in this activist phase, like 16 to 22 is this early activist phase. We all went through it, of early adulthood, where the world is just full of injustice everywhere. Think about how many times you said this to your adults at home, your parents or whatever. It's not fair. And they're also at the same time full of this productive energy and desire to change it and do something about it. Often that energy gets channeled into something that's not productive, but they have that desire to change it and do something about it. And you can work with that in an amazing way in high school. It's an optimal time to talk about it. Represent people their age in the curriculum. This, I think, is really cool. You have the unique ability as a world language teacher to show them real change makers, real cultural influencers that are actually their age. We don't get to do this a lot in other subjects. So let's do it in world language. Let's stop talking about 50 to 60-year-olds and a lot of history lessons. There's nothing wrong with 50 to 60-year-olds. It's just that we have a really unique opportunity to reach them at their age group and at their level. We talked about that we don't have this barrier as much when we're talking about our home culture, if we're American students or Canadian students or wherever you're watching this from, because we have an international audience a lot of the time. But we don't have the same barrier when we're learning about history, science, English, all those things, because we're in our home culture. But in world language, we have that barrier of the other, of the different, and it's pretty strong in early teenage years. So the less layers of difference, the better. If you can work with people that are their age in the curriculum, whew, you can make amazing shifts in their perspectives that way. I had a conversation with a world language teacher the other day who was using one of my virtual field trips. And she said, I'm a little afraid to use this in my classroom because there's a lot of stereotypes floating around my room already about this particular culture. And I'm not sure how to address it if it's an individual activity. I want to be in there with them in the room. And I said to that teacher, this resource allows them to explore this culture through the lens of people their age doing the same things as them and exploring the thoughts and feelings of the same types of things as them. So if there was any activity that you did that was independent, this is it, because they will be able to, as high schoolers, because I know how high schoolers think, that they want to see people their age doing the same things as them. It might be a different culture, but when you are breaking down that barrier and you have a large barrier, a thick one that you have to get through, The younger they are, the easier it is. The younger they are, the easier it is. The last thing that I will say too is my last tip for you is that multidisciplinary approaches slay at the high school. They slay. Oh, yeah. Adult like, yeah, very much so. They slay at this. So you're going to have a high school learner has a unique challenge for us that we need to overcome. They have a lot of advantages that we're going to talk about in a minute, but they have a unique challenge, which is that they have a lot of perceptions and misconceptions about what it means to learn a language. And one of them is that it's not for everybody, which is of course not true, because second language acquisition is something that we all do. From anybody can do it, right? It engages all pieces of your brain, and there's not really as much to do with aptitude as we had previously thought. So it's for everybody. Some people will do it faster, but everybody can learn a second language. So multidisciplinary approaches really help with this misconception about language learning, especially if you're working on things with math or statistics or probability or things that aren't as related to English or the social sciences, because people who prefer language classes and world language classes also tend to lean into that area as well. So you can see from this list that I could clearly go on forever about ways to teach high school. It's my jam. I love high schoolers. And I will leave you with these few thoughts that these are some advantages that high schoolers have, just general older learners in second language acquisition. We know that children do have they have a head start in terms of their ability to achieve certain levels of native-like competence in both fluency and pronunciation. But here are some things that older learners definitely raise the bar on. Learning capacity. That also means speed. You can go a lot faster in a high school world language classroom. I mean, miles faster. Don't go crazy. We talked about that in level 1 and level 2 curriculum missteps. So make sure you catch that class. But analytic ability is also there in a real way. That's just starting to emerge in middle school, but it is there in high school. They can do really deep thinking in high school. Really deep thinking. You will be amazed. Pragmatic skills. Oh man, do you have any idea how good high schoolers are at finding the easiest route to completion? You know what I'm talking about. They do the same thing with language. They will always find the easiest way to come to a solution in every aspect of their life. And they will also do the same thing when it comes to language. They're really good at sifting out unimportant details in order to find the meaning. They also have greater knowledge of L1, so they can use this a lot to their advantage to make deeper connections and remember things better in their L2 or L3. They have a lot of real world knowledge that they can use, especially learners of Spanish and French, where that language is just floating all around. If you teach in America, those language pieces and cultural little juicy elements are everywhere in America. So they have a lot of real world knowledge to bring to the table. And our anime fans learning Japanese, that also helps a lot. And these specific ones are from this book, Introducing Second Language Acquisition, from Seville and Troiki. Maybe that's it. We'll see. Y'all, we have a lot of tips here for you for high school world language. My favorite one, though, I'm sure you can tell, I think this one is the most important, mutual respect and fairness, but my favorite one in terms of target language is highly personalized curriculums with time to talk, getting to know your students, and then treating high school students like adults, because they're almost adults. I would say that's the most important. And y'all, here we are. This was a very meaty class. Very meaty class. So know that you can always go back to all of these blog posts that I have for you. After this class ends, I'll post them so that you can go back and see all of the notes that I have for you. That's why I made these a little bit of a different format than usual. If you're new to these classes and you don't know any different, this was just an exciting thing. But you can always go back to these blog posts so that you can review everything that we talked about here. But how are you going to use this information that you learned today to either tweak your lessons or maybe treat your students a little bit differently, have slightly different expectations for what's going to go on in your classroom? I would love to know how this class helped you. What's something that you learned today that's going to help you in your expectations of your students, or maybe even the shaping of your curriculum? Let me know in the comments below. And I'm going to look here on any comments that I missed here. Laura says, oh, I'm a personal introvert, but I love the extrovert aspects of teaching. It's like the performer in me. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. We all do have a teaching personality, right? And we put on our performer face a lot. Adult-like. Yep, they are. They're very adult-like. They are indeed very adult-like. Okay, y'all. We've already had a very meaty class, so I'm going to let you go because I know you have busy, busy lives. And thank you so much for being here with me. Know that you can attend every single class every Wednesday at 3 p.m. EST, and that the whole schedule is available if you go to this website right here, www.lalibrelanguagelearning.com/Wednesday. There's a whole document that has all of the class information with linky links and all of the topics that we'll be talking about for our full curriculum series that's going on until June 16th. So make sure that you join me for the next one. That's going to be extra juicy. And thanks for joining me here today. Y'all have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next Wednesday for the next one. Check in the comments below. I will post all of the links for the blogs that we just went over today. Have an awesome evening. Y'all rock.